Welcome to running Tracetest and the OpenTelemetry Demo App on HashiCorp Nomad. Now, this is meant to be a super high-level demonstration of Tracetest capabilities as it runs tests against traces generated by a couple of gRPC services in the OTel Demo App. And all of this is running on HashiCorp Nomad. So here I'm assuming that you already have a Nomad instance up and running. So right now what we're doing is copying various commands from the Nomad conversions repo to deploy both Tracetest and the OpenTelemetry Demo App on Nomad. And if we head over to our Nomad console and refresh, you'll see that the jobs are starting to one by one come up. Now, typically this does take a few minutes, but I've sped things up for the sake of moving things along. The next thing we'll want to do is configure Tracetest. So we'll tell the CLI to point to the Tracetest instance that we just created. And then you'll see that there's a file called config.yaml, which contains all the configuration info that Tracetest is looking for. So next we're heading over to Tracetest so that we can see that it has actually deployed. And then we're going to run a couple of tests against a couple of gRPC endpoints in the OpenTelemetry Demo App. The first one being the cart service. And if we refresh the screen, you'll see that our test has run successfully. And if we go over to our test in a second, you will see that the attribute that we picked for testing has passed the test, which we already knew because we also saw the CLI with the positive message. So next we will run a test against our recommendation service. And you can see that both the test definition YAMLs are up on VS Code. So we'll run that. The test was successful, so we'll check that in Tracetest. We refresh our page and you'll see that the recommendation service test has run successfully. And again, we can see that by going to the console, and we are testing get product list. Specifically, we want to see that the filtered products count is 9. So that shows up in Tracetest. Now we should also be able to see this in our observability backend, which is Lightstep. So we're heading over there in a second. So once we log into Lightstep, we will be creating a Lightstep notebook to allow us to see our trace. So here we go. We're creating a notebook for our trace, and specifically our starting point of our trace is going to be the Tracetest root trace. And we see that the trace name is, the operation name is trigger. So we're going to go over to the trace view to see the trace waterfall diagram, and you can see get product list is there and our attribute is there, and it shows a value of 9. So it corresponds to what we saw in Tracetest. And there you have it. We've got Tracetest and the OpenTelemetry Demo App running on Nomad. Now be sure to check out the Tracetest project at tracetest.io, and of course the OpenTelemetry Demo App on GitHub. And finally check out my Nomad conversions repo, where you will find the Nomad job specs for both Tracetest and the OpenTelemetry Demo App. Thanks so much for listening. You can find me on Mastodon, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and also be sure to check out the On Call Me Maybe podcast. Until next time, peace, love, and code.